So if you're watching this video now, just to say welcome to part 2. And as we're heading into the final 3 rounds of 2024, let's look at the bottom half of the standings and see where the priorities for each driver are lying. And also, don't be fooled into thinking just because it's the bottom half, oh, it's boring and it's not so exciting. If anything, there's more panic, desperation, hunger than anything going on in the top half. So a lot of potential drama and a lot to watch out for. Right, so let's get straight into this, and if you haven't already, of course, please be sure to subscribe. Okay, so let's kick things off with the one and only Nico Hülkenberg. Now, with some of his performances this year, a renewed sense of Hulkamania has been running wild. But how he's going to repeat this sort of form or results next season is anyone's guess. Right now, I think he just needs to soak up the maximum of what it feels like to drive a car that can quite happily finish in the latter half of the points. Because I'm certain he is not going to get that next year. So for Hulk now, he just needs to relish it, grab what he can, and take any kind of positivity or motivation over to Sauber next season, who, by the way, if you haven't noticed, need it desperately. Haas, of course, are still in the fight with Alpine for 6th in the constructors' standing, so millions of dollars at play there. So Hulk needs to do what he's done best all of so far this season and just chip away at those latter point-scoring positions. Also, you never know, at Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, the planets could align and the greatest thing could happen in the world, and Hulk could finally get his podium. Right, so next up is Yuki Tsunoda. Now, with Yuki ending a massive point-scoring drought at the Brazilian Grand Prix, he is going to want to continue this form until the end of the season. But of course, what will be playing on his mind is the uncertainty around Perez's future at Red Bull. And Yuki will want to do absolutely everything he can to be first in the queue if it all, hits the fan. And also, he'll want to squash any kind of question that Liam Lawson could get the better of him. And he needs to keep an eye on this because Lawson is currently riding a wave of popularity that could easily overshadow anything that Tsunoda does. So the long and short of it is that Yuki just needs to do everything he can, whether he scores points or not, to put himself and solidify himself as first in the queue at Red Bull. And not only that, but make sure everyone else knows it too. And so next up we have Pierre Gasly. So Monsieur Gasly, in his beautiful new shock pink Alpine liveried car for the last 3 rounds, just has to continue this momentum that was found from the podiums at the Brazilian Grand Prix. He's also got a long-term contract, so he's safe in that aspect and can drive with a level of comfort. And what will also spur him on is knowing that he's pretty much won the Ocon-Gasly civil war that has gripped Alpine for the last 2 seasons. Also, by snatching points, he could still wind up 10th in the driver standings, which is effectively top of this 3rd tier. You've got the front runners, and then you have Fernando Alonso, who is isolated, and then you have the rest, the 3rd tier. And not only that, he's going to be the guy that everyone Alpine next season will be looking towards. So he has these 3 races to finish, sowing those seeds and show some leadership in the team, which they can grab onto moving forward. And so after Gasly, next up we've got Lance Stroll. Oh, Lance. What do we say about Lance? Okay, so first things first, the biggest priority at this stage has got to be bring the car home in one piece and also in a position which isn't terrible. Surely that can't be too much to ask for. Just no more crashes or silly accidents because his reputation is on life support. It may already be dead. In fact, it could be worse, it's probably zombified by now. Lance hasn't scored since Hungary and probably won't do so in the next 3 rounds, but can just try and show something that will maybe start to change people's minds ever so slightly. And also, if he does have an accident or a mistake or an error, either way wrecks the car, and it is his fault, just say sorry. Sorry is a fantastic word, and it goes so far. So basically, don't wreck the car and accept responsibility. He has got probably the easiest run-in of any of the drivers this season. And so next up, we've got Esteban Ocon. Now, aside from his fantastic podium in Brazil, 2024 has been a pretty awful season for Ocon and one to forget, especially now that he's been booted out of his own team by arch-rival Pierre Gasly. I think what Ocon needs to do from now until the end of the season is just drive in such a way that people get excited and interested about his future move to Haas. To myself anyway, I see him as a downgrade from Hülkenberg and even Magnussen at times, so he just kind of has to drum up this interest that this move and also possibly the money that they've paid to sign him is worth it. And in the final 3 rounds, he could perhaps sneak a point or maybe 2, but ultimately, if he was to beat Pierre Gasly in the driver standings, and he's not that far off, that would be a massive success for him before he walked out of the door at Alpine. And next in line, we've got Kevin Magnussen. Now, I'm genuinely going to miss K-Mag, not because of his driving ability, but for that personality he has that I think is so important to have in F1. Amongst all the please love me, please like me kind of drivers, it's kind of refreshing to have a driver like K-Mag who isn't really fussed and also can still hold his own on the track. So K-Mag in these final 3 races just needs to do what he does best. Snatch points, of course, if the opportunity arises, but if Hulkenberg is ahead and looking like Haas's best option, then just be the ultimate team player, create havoc, cause frustration, and make the other drivers' lives harder. It's just gamesmanship in its basic form, and Magnussen is very, very good at that. He's been a great servant to Haas, it's a shame to see him go, but with 2025, you never know, he might need to keep his phone switched on. Okay, so next up is Alex Albon. Now, Albon faces a seriously tricky run into the final 3 rounds. His luck since Singapore has been dreadful and he needs to rediscover form, but also make sure that Colapinto doesn't get the better of him. Now, I know he's got a contract, he's confirmed for next season, but ultimately that will not be a good look. Now, the reality is Williams are limping to the end of the season and just want this one to be over as quick as possible. They're effectively locked into their position in the constructor standings after a killer blow from Alpine at the Brazilian Grand Prix. And so with Albon being the senior driver, of course, he needs to really step up and show some resilience and leadership in this final run-in. Now, of course, he may already be doing that, but from what we've seen so far, I'm not getting the sense that that's really happening. Now, the track types in these final 3 races should suit Albon and Williams, but because of their recent accidents and damages, points in any of these final 3 races, I think, would be a miracle. Let's just wait and see. And next up is Oliver Bearman. Now, you might be wondering why I've decided to put Bearman in this list, but one reason is because he's currently 18th in the driver standings, 7 points from 3 races. And all it takes is a virus or a stomach bug from someone at Ferrari or Haas, and boom, he's right back in there. And so with that, he may as well bring his gear to Vegas, Qatar, or Abu Dhabi. And if he's not called up, then he needs to take the time to soak up everything he can whilst he can walk freely and talk to anyone he wants at the Ferrari garage. Even if it's just a quick chat with Leclerc or Sainz and the Ferrari crew, just so that he can arrive swinging at Haas in 2025. But in the meantime, all he can really do is sit and watch and wait and just be ready to jump in the car if needed. Okay, and next up is Franco Colapinto. So in these last 3 races, Colapinto really has a big job on his hands. He's had a very impressive run so far as Sargent's replacement. Okay, he had a small blip in Brazil, but now he has 3 races to show everybody that he is the genuine article and the real deal. A solid showing in these final 3 races would be a signal that this is a guy who needs to be in a race seat as soon as possible. But on the other hand, a lackluster showing or even another costly accident might take the eyes and interest of F1 away from Colapinto and onto someone else. Everything moves so quickly in Formula One, and a driver can quickly go from the flavour of the month to, well, he's not as good as we thought he was. So to avoid this, Colapinto and his Williams that might be ramshackled together just needs to drive maturely and confidently. Points would be nice at this stage, but I don't really think that's going to affect things. Even if he finishes the next 3 races 10th, 12th, 13th, 14th, but drove with purpose and maturity, that would be enough, I think, to kind of seal him for better things in the future. In fact, that's exactly just what he needs to do. He needs to drive in a way that keeps the Colapinto hype train rolling forwards. And next up is Liam Lawson. Now, Lawson has a very interesting opportunity now to get as close as possible, even surpass his predecessor Daniel Ricciardo in the Drivers' Championship. Now, it won't be his ultimate goal, but it would be a great statement of intent and a message to Red Bull management that they've made the right decision in bringing him on. And furthermore, this effort will be fueled by the small factor that the seats-long Max may not be as confirmed as they say. So Lawson has to take every opportunity in the next 3 races, not just to do a better job than Tsunoda, but also Perez as well as a bonus. He's more or less in exactly the same sort of situation as Tsunoda, where he has to drive in these next 3 races in a certain way so that he is first in the queue for Red Bull should anything happen with Sergio Perez. Okay, next up is Zhou Guanyu. Now, there can't be a whole lot spurring on Guanyu at the moment. Points are out of reach and there is no drive for 2025. After what's been a very disappointing year for him, I'm sure that he just wants to get to the end and into that Ferrari reserve role that's been rumoured around him recently. And what could help that along and bring it to fruition is to show Maranello some performances where there's no mistakes and no silly errors, and just to drive with confidence and just show that ability, flashes of that ability that we saw at Alfa Romeo. And also there's a small factor that Guan Yu has been beaten by Bottas in the driver standings 2 years in a row. He's ahead of him this year. It's his first chance to beat his teammate in the standings, so Guan Yu is going to see that probably now as his main goal for this season. Okay, and last up now, finally, is Valtteri Bottas. It's actually stunning to think rock bottom of the Drivers' Championship, even behind Logan Sargent, is Bottas. Now, of course, finishing last in the standings is an elite club that Bottas won't want to join anytime soon. And I'm sure will do everything in his power to try and correct this in the final 3 rounds. And he doesn't even need points finishes to do this. This is how desperate it actually is. Now, if I'm correct, if he just manages to finish 11th or 12th place in the final 3 races, that should be enough to lift him above Sargent and Zhou Guanyu. Honestly, he just needs to live on a steady diet of days of thunder and motivation over the next 3 weeks to pull this off. And this sort of hunger as well would also show Mercedes that Bottas still has some fire in the belly, and a return in the form of a Mercedes reserve drive could be worth the investment. Let's just hope those green flames painted on the Sauber car will add something to the performance, even if it's just psychological. That's how bad it's got. It's still amazing to think that we are getting towards the end of the 2024 season. It didn't seem that long ago that we were kicking things off and looking at these carbon fiber liveries at the start of the season. So overall, every driver, whether it's the top half or the bottom half, has their own little missions, interests, and things to look out for in these final stages. And you know what? From a fan perspective, we better soak it up because that season break seems to take forever. But where do you guys think drivers' priorities lie? Do let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, of course, and showing your support. I'm Paul, and as always, I'll see you later. Cheers.